Well, hello everyone. I know it's been a while, and I just said, screw it, let's just go with a curveball. You may know why you're here. You probably do, you filthy runt. And if you don't, welcome to the depravity of the HuniePop scaling. Let's do this shit. So I thought the best way to start with scaling would kind of be start with the big boys of the verse. And that would actually come in HuniePop 2, because HuniePop 1, there wasn't really any real antagonist per se. So in HuniePop 2, there were the Nymphogen. So these Nymphogen, who are basically awoken every 10,000 years from the cosmos in their slumber from like a super period of unspeakable PMS, as Q stated. Basically, if you don't get like banged off their insane lust, they are chill, just destroying like endless galaxies, and only a hero of unparalleled like power holds the ability to return them to their slumber. In this case, it's the human protagonist, obviously, from HuniePop 1. Humans are mad OP in this verse, just saying, by the way. So, right at the beginning of HuniePop 2, which takes place 1 or 2 years after HuniePop 1, you basically already have her going to the protagonist again and just, talking to him about the destruction the Nymphogen will erupt if they don't get boned properly. And kind of like her casual tone, like when describing such catastrophic events, like the destruction of like all of these galaxies, alongside her seeing their destructions like firsthand on past occasions, I feel should already make her baseline universal. So Q then like refers to the higher ups, most likely referring to the corporates. The virgins are just her clients for them. So although being like bare universal as a love fairy, that should imply that they scale much higher. Like I'm talking about the higher ups, obviously. Q even separates Venus from the equation, as if that was all but like an impressive side feat. Possibly that's like kind of egging on to someone even more powerful than Venus. And with this, it's important to note that in HuniePop 1, Venus was the one implied to be mainly in charge of Q, not the corporate. The corporate was induced in 2 mainly. Her existence should also obviously imply the existence of an entire pantheon, to which Venus may not even be the strongest. And I thought this was interesting, seen by the second message of Venus here. It said like she had to work off her debt from fairy school before becoming a goddess. I believe that could mean love fairies, including that of Q, all hold potential to rival the power of Venus with experience and teachings. So they can definitely at least reach bare minimum universal if you want to really lowball them initially. And then keep in mind Q is the only known character throughout HuniePop 1 and 2 who knows she's within the video game itself. This was mainly shown in the ice rink date in HuniePop 1, when she references her stating that this is like her favorite song in the game's whole soundtrack. And she's obviously not even close to being the head honcho, and she knows every single song in the soundtrack, which is pretty impressive. Q is also alongside with the protagonist, the only other knowingly and unaffected being within the parallel universe in which Honeycam Studio took place. This scales her alongside the main protagonist, obviously, to mere minimum multiversal with the stacking universes. There were some examples of inconsistencies between the verses, obviously. A good example with like Q stating at the beginning of HuniePop 2, when she left the protagonist, coming back like a year or 2 later. Some of the characters' ages with Honeycam Studio and Honeycam 2 do not match with one another based on those measurements. So some people were kind of conflicted if it was kind of canon, and a lot of people did not, so they kind of like ignored the feats entirely. But I found out, I played the fucking game entirely again, and there was proof in HuniePop 2 that Honeycam Studio is indeed canon, So this has been disputed, and the protagonist confirms this with Lola in one of his three options. Further support of this validity is when you talk with Candy, who was like one of the main girls in Honeycomb Studios. I think she was like one of the um, biggest girls you could get, who apparently in this universe still does live cam shows. Keep in mind, none of these girls know who their boss is, who is him. Only he and Q can fathom the multiverse. They still know that they like who they are, etc. Um, so yeah, keep in mind the two stack, and they're the only two that can recognize everyone else, and not vice versa. And just also keep in mind, as I said before, out of all the dialogue in this fucking game, this took so long to get. So I'd appreciate the thumbs up here if you don't mind, uh, for my sanity. Thanks. Okay, so now we've done a good amount of Q scaling. We should kind of complement it with some human scaling since it is OP. So a good example first is Zoe, who was able to both comprehend the whole plot of the game in her dream, hence her reason for being here to help from the very start. She could also sense the presence of Q, who is invisible to mortal eyes. Love fairies are invisible to those who, aren't their clients. And this even completely confused Q, who was lost for words and kind of ditched. Like Zoe basically mind hacks her, who's probably multiversal. And then like simple human differences, such as like one just being like transgender, are able to passively throw off the honeybee, aka the ultimate plot machine. Keep in mind, this is like tech created by like Q's like top corporation managers who were easily above her, making Polly possibly holding almost like high multiversal resistances just by being like who she naturally is or like feels like she wants to be. So that's also very impressive. And then let us, of course, just not forget the whole entire gameplay aspect, which I will admit is pretty fun. Um, how just humans are casually able to just like play with pure emotions and feelings like candy, and can woo anyone in like just some mere seconds, from like weebs to complete goddesses, literally. However, all of this, Q states that the Nymphogen are far stronger power wise than anyone the protagonist has faced prior. Huge buff to them, seeing how he banged Venus, who was obviously seen as the head honcho in HuniePop 1, where every other human failed. So yeah, this was a good intro right off the bat for the Nymphogen. Then here's some complementary direct evidence. Q is complete fodder in comparison. With such a differential in power, holding potential to reach into high multiversal, I wouldn't doubt like putting the Nymphogen at like in return, possibly like low complex multiversal could be like much higher, since like there's no restrictions in the story, where the power really reaches. Um, and basically, they just reaffirm that there is no being which carries such power of lust which can rival them. And basically, they're just like mostly immortal, since like once you bone them, they instantly just return to slumber for the uncountable amount of time. And I think it's fair at this point to just see the protagonist, Chad, as a literal deus ex machina, or a complete omnipotent being. I have no clue. You can say either or. It's just for the story. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Maybe some more troll videos down the line. I still want to do some WoW, but there's a good change. And yeah, don't sleep on HuniePop.